Thank you all very much for being here. The members that are here in person, if you could introduce yourselves and just give us your district, and we'll go from there.
Good morning, everybody. I am Representative Donna Shuren, and I hail from the 147th District in Montgomery County, just up the Northeast Extension, around Lansdale and Harleysville. Thank you for having me.
Good morning, John Lawrence from Southern Chester County.
Representative Josh Kale from Beaver, Washington County.
Representative Craig Williams from the 160th, and I would say to all of you, welcome to our district.
And Zach Mako from the Lehigh Valley, Lehigh, Northampton Counties, 183rd.
And we also have online with us today Brian Smith and Jill Cooper. And today we are in Mr. Williams, Representative Williams' district. Representative Williams, if you'd like to give a brief introduction, and we'll get the hearing underway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to say thank you for bringing the policy committee down here. Your work on this committee and in our caucus in particular has been extraordinary. We see how hard you're working for our Commonwealth. Welcome to the 160th District. It's comprised of 8 municipalities: Concord, Bethel, Chadds Ford, Chester Heights, and Thornbury in Delaware County, and in Chester County, Westtown, Birmingham, Thornbury, and Pennsbury. We're basically situated along the intersection of Route 1 and 202, east, west, and north-south. And as you've driven through it, you can see that we are both residential and a high infiltration of business. And as a consequence of that, we tend to be a magnet for public safety issues, which is why we've asked you to come down here today to have a discussion about enforcement, law enforcement, issues surrounding our police and our state troopers, and also on, as a corollary to that, restorative justice issues. So we've invited Mr. Power and Professor Volz to come down and talk about youth courts as an opportunity to keep young people out of the criminal justice system and give them a second chance. And then Mr. Power is going to talk about work that he's been doing with the governor's task force and locally in restorative justice. So a two-piece conversation around what I call second chances and also law enforcement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. And I will note that the initial agenda had the first panel that we were talking to going second and the second panel going first. And I apologize for that flip, but because of a scheduling issue, we wanted to make sure that we gave all of our testifiers an opportunity to speak. So the first panel we're going to be talking to is the Restoring Justice panel. And today we have Mr. Powers, who Representative Williams had noted, and Professor Volz as well. Mr. Powers, if you could go first and keep your testimony 3 to 5 minutes so that we could have questions after, and we'll go from there.
Yes, sir. Good morning, and a heartfelt thank you to Chairman Kale, Craig Williams, and the House Republican Policy Committee for allowing me to speak today. I spent my career at the intersection of juvenile justice and education. Today, I will be presenting in my capacity as a member of HEAL PA, which is a coalition through the Office of Advocacy and Reform that is tasked with implementing the Trauma-Informed PA Plan. On HEAL PA, I chair the Prevention Task Force and the Education Committee. The work that we have been doing for the past 4 years largely advocates for restorative practices to prevent entry into the school-to-prison pipeline, and by extension, prevent youth crime. Any statistics quoted today are from sources cited on the reference page in the handout, which will be made available online. The United States of America is experiencing a multi-system crisis that has resulted from a convergence of several system fractures. Youth mental health, education, juvenile justice, and workforce development are 4 such systems. The COVID-19 pandemic accelerated pre-existing trends in the rapid retirement of educators, counselors, skilled laborers, and other professionals in high-priority occupations. The increased demand for these professionals, coupled with the explosive need for mental health services, has left communities in Pennsylvania searching for solutions to address youth behavior and workforce shortages. The impact of these converging issues on students has contributed to the potential of youth becoming system involved. However, each poses a viable opportunity to prevent youth crime. Mental health is directly correlated with criminal justice involvement, with 1 in 4 people with a mental health condition being arrested in their lifetime, and 7 in 10 youth in the juvenile justice system having a diagnosed mental health condition. Adverse childhood experiences and protective and compensatory factors improve the situation or exacerbate it for some, and are often mirrored in community settings, leading to negative or threatening interactions spilling over into the learning environment. With increased cases of aggression in schools and significant staffing shortages, educators and school resource officers alike are finding it increasingly difficult to balance safety with education, sometimes resulting in schools becoming an entry point into the school-to-prison pipeline. In recent years, a shift away from alternative education programs, congregate care settings, and youth detention in favor of community-based alternatives was initially optimistic. Leading up to the pandemic, programs like these were being used less and less frequently. During the pandemic, many congregate care facilities closed due to their inability to stay fiscally sound in the face of near zero enrollment or concerns over youth treatment. With few congregate care settings remaining, law enforcement is now faced with fewer viable options for the accountability of high-risk youth. Often youth who have been processed with serious charges are back in their communities the same day, contributing to feelings of frustration among law enforcement and the court system. To address these factors contributing to youth crime, we must consider a multi-domain approach, prioritizing youth mental health, access to preventative and diversionary programming, and the use of restorative practice to effect lasting change. Trauma-informed practices, which create a culture of safety, are an effective strategy for addressing youth mental health. The combination of trauma-informed approaches and restorative school discipline practices further reduces the likelihood of system involvement. Restorative practices are proactive approaches that repair harm and restore relationships. The focus of these practices is on building relationships, community, and understanding. Programs like youth courts have been shown to improve social-emotional growth in youth, equipping them with the strategies needed to make better decisions inside and outside of schools. When used in the context of non-punitive school discipline, they have the power to interrupt entry into the school-to-prison pipeline. Additionally, when law enforcement officers are engaged in youth courts processes in schools, or if law enforcement officers can use youth courts as a discretionary diversionary practice for minor offenses, the potential to create empathy and understanding between law enforcement, youth, and communities is considerable. Restorative practices benefiting the social-emotional development of youth also foster positive school culture and improve teacher-student relationships. The benefit of restorative practices include the increased student engagement, reduced disciplinary incidents, and decreased likelihood of involvement with criminal justice system. Increasing access to and the use of restorative approaches and diversion programs can equitably support youth who may be destined to end up adrift, characterized by multiple system involvement, poorer academic achievement, lower lifetime wages, and unaddressed trauma. Moreover, the potential use of diversion programs offering a workforce development pathway as community service, such as pre-apprenticeship programs, has the power to empower currently enrolled youth, out-of-school youth, and young adults to fill high-priority occupations. This strategy would begin to resolve workforce development shortages, provide people with the skills to earn family-sustaining wages, and ultimately impact many of the factors that contribute to generational poverty. In conclusion, with the support of elected officials sponsoring bills which prioritize restorative practices and work being done by organizations like HEAL PA, which seek to infuse trauma-informed and restorative practices into schools and communities, the Commonwealth of PA has the opportunity to begin to resolve many of the issues facing youth and communities. These critical efforts have the potential to significantly improve youth mental health, develop positive cultures within schools, and undermine other factors leading to youth crime. I urge anybody interested to learn more to visit healpa.org for the full set of recommendations from the Juvenile Criminal Justice Task Force. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Power. Professor.
Okay, so I have a tendency to talk too loud, so if I get to be bothersome, somebody wave at me or something. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here this morning. I view this as a real opportunity to begin to figure out how do we publicize more about the fact that things don't have to be the way they are, that even though they're very complex, that there are ways of beginning to create good citizens who will be less inclined to engage in violent acts. Before I get going, I want to say that I've helped start a youth court in Montgomery County. Norristown Area High School has a youth court. I was brought in there about 2015. I worked with the Public Defender's Office. They've had a youth court there for about 7 or 8 years. I also want to acknowledge Representative Williams, who was kind enough to come and see one of my 4th grade youth courts about 8 or 9 years ago. And although I don't talk a lot about my elementary school youth court kids, it's a promising area in my view. And I also want to say that when I'm done, if you want to know more about youth courts and for some reason you don't want to reach out to me, which is fine, Representative Williams' wife, Jennifer Williams, who's the former U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, helped me run youth courts for 10 years in the Chester Upland School District and actually coordinated volunteers from that office for about a 10-year period. And I'm extremely grateful to her, and I think she probably knows about as much about youth courts and what they can do as I do. So my testimony, I'm going to try to focus on 3 areas. First is the materials have a PowerPoint, the slides for PowerPoint. I don't want to go through that individually, but I can tell you that if you take the time to do that, you will understand youth courts, that they are student-run, disciplinary programs, usually run in high schools and middle schools, that can do 2 things. They can keep a kid from being suspended or expelled for a relatively minor act that a lot of teenagers engage in, and they can also diminish the referral system to the justice system. We've had more success getting them in schools than we have getting them in the justice system, but I hope that changes. So that's the first issue. I don't want to talk much about the mechanics of a youth court. I have, just want to show you, we have a manual with 21 lesson plans. This is the 4th edition. We have a 5th edition. That's how long we've been doing this. 21 lesson plans where a teacher can pick this up. Some teachers have done little more than talk to me and use the lesson plans and create a youth court. We also have a student youth court, which is for the students to actually use as they're learning how to run youth courts. Just wanted you to know that we already have some materials. I also included in the handouts that I think you got, one of the pages lists 4 or 5 videos that you can access. I would encourage you to do that. 3 of the 5 videos are no longer than 12 minutes long. 2 of them are only 5 minutes long. They show middle school, high school, and elementary school kids not only running a youth court, but talking about the experience of what it does for them. And what I would say it does for them is it begins the process of making a good citizen. The second thing I want to talk about is a petition that I prepared about 2 years ago at the end of a lot of policy work done in the state of Pennsylvania. In 2019, the Joint State Government Commission, submitted a report based on a 1.5 years of meetings and investigation. I was a member of that 22-member advisory board, and they concluded that Pennsylvania would benefit from having youth courts in both the schools and in the justice system. That was one of the major recommendations of that report. In 2020, and this is something that Liam referenced, the Office of Advocacy and Reform orchestrated a report on how to make Pennsylvania a trauma-informed state. Now that we know what trauma does to human beings, and particularly from my point of view, kids, what are we going to do about it? And how are we going to train people in hospitals, people in schools, people in the justice system, police officers, judges, how to do that? Rob Reed is a friend of mine, works for the Attorney General's office. He's been traveling the state for 5 years, educating people about trauma. I think trauma is a major part of understanding what we can do to reform the system. The third report was the Juvenile Justice Task Force report, which I assume all of you are more intimate with than I am. But the two takeaways that I took from that were that there's a racially biased system in Pennsylvania, unfortunately, that needs to be addressed. Too many kids of color are being placed into the justice system. And too much money is spent at the end of the school-to-prison pipeline. We're spending a lot of money detaining kids, housing kids, and I think that that is necessary at times, don't get me wrong, but the recommendation was that Pennsylvania find a way to stop the flow of cases from the schools to the justice system. About 12 years ago, because I know this has changed, but about 12 years ago, when Philadelphia got serious about this, they reported that 1 out of every 4 kids that ended up in the justice system was referred from a school. So the rhetoric of a school-to-prison pipeline, it's not comfortable language, but it gets the message across of what our policies are really doing to kids. And then the third thing I want to mention, I may have 4 things I want to say actually, is that I've got, if you look at the handouts again, I don't have time to go into describe them, but a prosecutor in New York called me once and asked me how youth courts could deal with violence. I said, well, they do a lot more than deal with violence. And he said, well, that's what I'm making a presentation on. Can you do me a paper? So I wrote a 1-page paper, which I feel pretty comfortable with, on youth courts and violence prevention. It's 1 page in your materials. The second document lists benefits from youth courts to the individual, to the person that got in trouble, the offender, to the school, and to the community. It lists the benefits, and I won't even elaborate that. And then the last thing is my actual petition, which what I did is I circulated this. I circulated it to Representative Williams, a couple of Democratic state senators got a copy of this, and anybody that I thought might pay attention. And what I had done was I analyzed all 3 of these reports, the 2019 Youth Court Report, the 2020 Trauma Plan for Pennsylvania, and the 2021 Juvenile Justice Reform. And like what I was concerned with is that's so much policy, that's covering so much ground, that my little issue, which is how can we help kids be part of the solution to this thing, was going to get lost. So I analyzed all 3 of those, wrote a 7 or 8 page analysis of that, cited the actual documents. So this isn't like Greg Volz thinks this is a good idea or this is a bad idea, but I'm using the language of the actual reports. And I would encourage you and your staff to take a look at that if you really want to understand how these 3 reports over the past 3 or 4 years can possibly work together as a framework for structuring juvenile justice reform. Last thing I want to say, and I am at the end, 2 state senators in Delaware County are proposing to introduce youth court legislation, and I've been working with them for a long, long time. They have not introduced it yet. I can't guarantee you they will introduce it, but they have announced they're going to introduce it. And I believe that a well-structured youth court bill tied in with trauma and with juvenile justice reform would go a long way towards building the kind of students and citizens that this Commonwealth needs. And my final comment is that the systems are fatigued. They're exhausted. They're most people that I know that work in public education right now think that they're already asking us to do way too much. So I think if you decide to structure any kind of reform or policy changes, I think you need to be aware of that issue. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Professor. I know that I'm going to open it up for questions amongst the members. I'll ask a couple questions out of the gates. We'll hand it over to the Representative Williams, and we'll go from there. Back when I was full-time practicing attorney, I used to do some work for Children and Youth Services, and I was always surprised, and I can't remember, and this was in Beaver County, so I'm sure there's differences, but I was always surprised at the percentage of kids that went through the foster system and then basically spent the rest of their life in the prison system, going in and out, and we certainly need to establish firmly the idea that actions have consequences. That is absolutely essential, and as far as making sure that we get people off the streets, and that's 100%, I'm there. Where I do think we do fall short a lot is what are we doing with people once they do get within the system? Because if it's just recycling them back onto the street and then they just commit the same crime, and what's the purpose of what we're doing here? And so I appreciate the work that you guys are talking about, and how we could help that system and make better citizens. I guess I'll ask this both, and it's a broad question. I'll let you take it where you want it. As far as where we are with Pennsylvania, boiling it down to the single most important thing that we could do right now from a policy standpoint, what would you say that first step is towards a more just system?
Without a doubt, I would say, and Professor Volz and I use this terminology in our private conversations, we need to provide off-ramps for the school-to-prison pipeline. There are sufficient on-ramps, and now we're smarter. We know the impact of trauma. We understand how trauma epigenetically truly changes DNA over time through generations. It's remarkable. But the impact of trauma and understanding trauma-informed care is a pedagogy, but it is not a program. We have to provide off-ramps from the school-to-prison pipeline that understands the impact of trauma and uses that to inform the practice.
I guess I would definitely agree with that. I work a lot with Liam. Liam's taught me a lot about trauma. But there is one issue that needs to be looked at, I think, rather than just talked about, because it's talked about. I testified 12 years ago in Harrisburg, and after it was over with, I'm just going to be real candid, two people came up to me, and one of them started talking to me, and the other one, waited until the other one got there. The one was from the justice system, and he said, "Oh, that's really," I was talking about youth courts. He said, "That's really interesting stuff." He said, but we don't know how to talk to the people in the Department of Education. I said, "We just don't know how to talk to them." I said, "Well, thank you." So then the other person comes up. I know this sounds like a Saturday Night Live routine, but it's not. It's from the Department of Education. And he said, "That was really interesting stuff that you said." He said, "But we don't know how to talk to those people in the justice system." There are some long-standing issues far beyond what's on my plate to deal with. But if you look at a kid dealing with school, being traumatized, and most of the kids that end up getting in trouble and end up in a detention facility have been traumatized one way or the other. So if you look at that kid, when he goes to school, he's carrying his traumatic personality with him, and his ways of behaving, and his ways of reacting and coping. And so, in my view, the people who are building the new system have to understand both what's going on in the schools and what's going on in the justice system. And that's complicated stuff. But it can be done. We know it can be done. So I would just, that would be my view of something to keep in mind is the communication between the two major systems that have to work together.
Thank you. Since we've began, we also had Administrator Delosier join us and Representative Brown. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I've been friends with these two gentlemen for a long time, and I'm so happy to have you here today. I'm going to have a question for each of you after I kind of set the stage a little bit, because I think that what Greg just said about trying to understand the bridge between education and the criminal justice system is part of the function that we can play, because we do talk in both worlds. And, you know, and Liam and I have talked about this recently, where this idea of trauma-informed care finally crystallized for me. As many of you know, and I've talked about it inside of our caucus, I lost my brother to addiction in 2020. And as his oldest brother, for decades, the problem for me seemed to be, why can't you stop? Which was never the right question. And I didn't know that until actually I was elected. And Bill Dondero from my staff and I went over to the George Hill Correctional Facility, and we sat with the entire group of men going through drug rehab at the facility. And after about an hour of conversation with them, I asked the question, I was like, do you guys remember the first day that you decided to use? And this guy who hadn't said a word the entire hour spoke up and said, in some colorful language, you got it all wrong. And I was like, what do I have wrong? He's like, it wasn't the day I decided to use. It was the day that my mother's boyfriend sexually assaulted me. And that was the moment that, I don't know, the scales were lifted from my eyes, the clouds parted, and I was like, oh. Of course, since then, I've thought many times, what was it my brother went through? Because I never asked that question. And I wish I had that opportunity back. But since coming to that realization, I found Liam, and I'd already known Greg from our prior work in youth courts, and he's right, my wife was like the rock star of that world. Working in Delaware County, the two of us together, and it was in part our advocacy that brought youth courts into Garnet Valley. But this idea of trauma-informed care, as I've become more and more an advocate for it locally with one of our institutions trying to bring it here, I articulate it in this way. How do we help a young man, because more often than not it's young boys, understand his why for his behavior? And if we can help him or her get to their why, then maybe they can cure the behavior. And I liked what you said in response to the first question, Liam, which is like, we need to provide off-ramps. And I think that's where we can be as a matter of statewide policy, which is absolutely rigid in our enforcement of the law, cracking down on crime, and still providing off-ramps, right? We can hold those two thoughts simultaneously, which is protecting our community and then helping people reform or restore, helping them understand their why. And so getting away from the academics of helping young people find their why, can you help us understand just a few very concrete fact patterns of what can happen to a young person and how that threads forward? I think some specific examples will help crystallize this idea of helping a young person discover their why, correcting it themselves, helping them deal with the underlying trauma as a way of reforming behavior.
Thank you. I appreciate that question. One thing I do want to make clear, and is often conflated, is that trauma-informed care and accountability do, in fact, go hand in hand and are mutually inclusive in that respect. We must live in a place of accountability. We must enforce laws. But where trauma or past experiences create roadblocks in the minds of youth, the only way out of that, the only path forward is through building trust. And there really is no other way around that. We have to take the time, we have to see, we have to be human, we have to share sometimes of ourselves and be prepared to be vulnerable in the process. And when a youth trusts you, they will begin to believe that you're there to help them. And when they finally feel that sense of safety and encouragement and empowerment, everything will come through the way it needs to. The youth will turn around and begin to benefit from the conversations. They'll begin to input truths that they've never verbalized in the past. Trust is the underpinning of this entire process from beginning to end, and it is also the most difficult thing because it takes time and compassion and a flawless track record of listening and being available. So without that trust, the process will be stifled and undermined.
Yeah, actually, this just follows what he said about trust. What popped in my head as you finished laying out that scenario was how youth court can have an impact here. And we're still trying to figure out some of this stuff, to be honest with you. But youth court is a program run by students, run by 17 and 18-year-old high school students, 12 and 13-year-old middle school students, 10 and 11-year-old fifth graders. They own it. We train them. We spend a lot of time training them. But once they know how to do it, we don't intervene and tell them what should happen to the person that got in trouble, that they've just held a hearing with. They decide that. So they learn to work together, and they learn to trust each other. A lot of these kids don't trust each other. There's a lot of problems in the neighborhoods. I'm sure you know that. But the best example I could give, a true life story, is we had a woman one year that she was not even a student at Chester Upland School District. She was being homeschooled. And she showed up and wanted to volunteer and be in the youth court, which we ran after school. And we allowed her, and we frankly were really impressed. This girl had her act together. She was good. She became a leader of the youth court. Afterwards, she went to Widener University and graduated and was a member of the Board of Trustees. They had one student from the student body that was on the Board of Trustees, and she was it. She continued to be very supportive of youth court. So one day I was training some Swarthmore students who, I used to work a lot with Swarthmore College students who would help me do the training. And we were going to have a little gathering at a pizza place in Swarthmore. And she shows up a little bit late. I wanted her to tell them what it was like being a Chester student who had experienced youth court. And she was rather flamboyant, and she had a presence about her. She shows up, she kind of drops her materials on the table. She sits down and she looks at everybody and she says, "I'm sorry I'm late. I've just got one thing I want to say. Youth court made me who I am." And to me, that's the kind of thing you just don't forget. I didn't tell her to say that. I'm glad she said it. But youth court is a way to build trust and give kids skills, particularly conflict resolution skills, that they're not going to learn in the other classes that the curriculum provides to them. So I don't know if that's exactly helpful, Representative Williams, but that was what came to mind.
Thank you. And I do actually have one follow-up question for you, Professor Boltz. Again, I want to reiterate, seen youth courts in action, and they're highly effective. And for those who haven't seen a youth court, the overall essence of it is children taking care of children's problems before they become bigger problems, before they become school administration problems, which, as we've talked about today, then become eventually a criminal justice problem. And something Liam just said, struck me as very true, both in the trauma-informed care institutions as much as it is in youth courts, which is that the whole idea here is not just an off-ramp and an excuse, but accountability as well, which is happening in youth courts. I would say one of the key principles that make youth courts work is that the person who's committed an offense has to recognize first the harm they've done to the victim and be apologetic for it, or it doesn't work. Or the corrective action handed out by the youth court will take that into consideration and could be far more harsh than it might have been. Here's the tougher nut to crack, because I've seen it work very effectively in some communities in Delaware County. In my communities, in my 3 school districts, where we have youth courts, it's not being used. And the reason that I'm hearing for it is the stigma of people. It's supposed to happen in a way that's completely anonymous, that nobody knows who's gone before a youth court, and no child right now believes that that will be true. So they're preferring suspension over making use of youth courts. What's your answer to that, and/or what's the fix?
I'm actually aware of one school in Delaware County that has that problem. That has not been a typical problem that's been expressed to me. I've probably trained 75 or 80 different groups of kids in counties all throughout the state. So number one, I don't think it's a typical problem. But secondly, I think what it could show, I may be wrong, it may not be that. I remember once a kid showed up in Chester for a hearing. He opened the door and looked at the students and he said, "I'll take the suspension." So the same type of an attitude. But we didn't have that happen enough for it to require us to think about how to solve it. My guess is that I would love to be part of the process of solving that for Garnet Valley. I've made it clear to them, and maybe I shouldn't have said that, identified the school. I think it's true. I think it speaks to the power of youth court. I think it speaks to the power that I did something wrong, and I don't want anybody else to know it, okay? I think that's a problem. I think when somebody does something wrong, they need to reflect on it, acknowledge it, and conform their behavior. So I don't think I have a total solution for you, but I'd be willing to meet with the administrators, and I've expressed that to them. That is not a typical problem. I'm not trying to dodge the question, but there was a middle school in Philadelphia that was, I didn't do the training. I had trained the guy that was doing the training, the teacher. They held 125 disciplinary hearings in 1 year. Now, he was a really good teacher, and he really loved youth court. And I'm not going to say everybody can do that, but I don't think he ever expressed that as being an issue. I think we'd have to go dig deeper to figure out what's really going on there.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I'm a believer in the program. I want to figure out the answer to this question so that we can make it work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Administrator Delosier from online.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Gentlemen, thank you for your testimony. And my question goes twofold. One is, as last session's chairman of Children and Youth, my fellow chair, Pam Delicio, and I worked on a number of issues dealing with trauma-informed care with our children within our system. So I value the fact that that has to be addressed when we're dealing with our youth and what has gotten them to this point, and understanding that. My question directly is, I was also on the Juvenile Justice Task Force that had a report last year. There's a number of pieces of legislation that are parts of that. One of the issues that I believe was important, I didn't agree with everything in the report, but there are pieces that absolutely would help our children. One of those issues was diversionary license by the judges, that when they make a decision, and you talked about youth court, so maybe that would be something that would be a part of that. But are there other recommendations, possibly, if you're familiar with that report, that you do support for our children and youth? And giving judges the capability of having diversionary options when sentencing some of our youth, to try and not make it a cycle where they come out of our juvenile system and end up in our adult system. If we can help correct what they have done in our juvenile to reform their actions, like you just mentioned, to change their actions so they don't end up in our adult system. Could you talk a little bit about diversionary options that judges might have? Would that, in your opinion, help?
Yeah, I'd be happy to take a first stab at that. There's about 1,400 youth courts in the United States. 2/3 of them are in the justice system. 1/3 of them are in the school system. In Pennsylvania, before the pandemic, we had maybe 60, 70 school-based youth courts dealing with school-based offenses. We had maybe 4 or 5 juvenile justice youth courts. I just found one outside Pittsburgh. It's in a place called Quaker Valley School District. I talked with a police officer just 2 weeks ago, running a tremendous program diverting kids out of the justice system with a school-based youth court. I think you would need to train the judges, number one, provide some kind of instruction. I don't know, I mean, I've been doing this for so long, I can't imagine what they're like when they've never heard of this idea, but I'm guessing they think this sounds like a kind of a crazy idea. Why would you want to have kids decide what happens to other kids? And actually what happens is, the problem isn't that the kids are too easy on the other kids. We have to train them so they're not too hard on them. We have kids that are very hard on each other. So I think part of the solution, if you want these, would be to train the judges. I frankly think the DAs need to be trained. I've had an enormous amount of pushback from district attorneys in Pennsylvania over the past few. I was originally funded by the Stoneleigh Foundation to create juvenile justice-based youth courts. In other words, they were going to divert kids out of the justice system. And after a year and a half, I was told by the people paying me, look, you got a couple going in the schools, just do that, don't worry about it, we know you've tried. There's a fair amount of pushback from the people in the justice system. But to give you an example of what can happen, New York has 70 juvenile justice youth courts. I mean, they're a neighboring state. They can't figure out how to get them in the schools because the resistance from the schools is so strong. You've got two systems with their own ways of doing things. I mean, the justice system was created, the late 1890s, 1895, governor in Illinois decided we ought to treat kids differently than adults. And the educational system, and I don't want to overgeneralize, and I know there's a lot of improvements that are made to public education, but basically we still got a teacher standing in front of 20 kids in desks. It's the model from the 1860s. And so you can look at that and you can say, well, it's impossible. How can we possibly change those two systems? But if you look at it from the lens of the kid, how can we make the kid have a better experience? And I would think you might want to have some contact with Aaron Venata, who's the police officer in the Quaker Valley School District. My understanding is he's paid by this, and I'm not saying that when you find an example, we should duplicate it in Pennsylvania. I think we should explore other options. But I would think that I was pretty impressed with what he was doing. He's holding 25 or 30 hearings a year. And he's handling serious cases. I mean, he's handling minor marijuana possession, alcohol issues as well. All of this can be done. It's a matter of whether there's a will, and I think, again, what Representative Williams said is you, the General Assembly, you're elected to solve society's problems. This is a big one, but you have influence and control of the purse over both the Department of Education and the justice system. And it would seem to me that if there was a will, there's a way. When there's not a will, there's never a way. But where there's a will, there's a way. And I've been trying for a long time to get people to understand that it doesn't have to be like this. Now, we're not saying that youth courts is going to solve every problem of juveniles in Pennsylvania. That's too complicated. But if I could just add one other thing, another thing it does that we haven't even talked about yet is it's a skill building program. The kids that run the court, okay, so you have a kid that got in trouble, he comes in, and instead of getting expelled or expended, he is handled by this youth court. What we have found as impressive and maybe more impressive from a standpoint of good benefits, it's the 20 kids that are running the youth court. They change. They learn how to work together. They learn how to express their voice. They learn how to cooperate with you. They learn to respect the rule of law. They finally have some appreciation for why we have a legal system and people in position of authority, and they understand that. I know I've given you a long-winded answer. I apologize for that. But the bottom line is, as much as we need youth courts in schools, we may need them more in the justice system.
Thank you. I just the capability of us to recognize that we need to do what we can to keep the kids that may have juvenile offenses out of the adult system. And, whether it's youth courts, whether it's, different options, I think, as you said, we need to make this a priority. And I think, we can save the dollars that it costs to house individuals and incarcerate them as adults. We can save victims by not having crimes occur, getting folks on the straight and narrow. And I think our kids would be better for it. So I think there's a lot of options out there. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Power had to go. He had a hard leave at 10:50. We appreciate him being here and testifying. Are there any more questions for this? All right. Thank you very much, Professor. We appreciate you being here. Yeah, absolutely. We have your testimony. It will be certainly taken under consideration, and it's a very important subject. So our next, yes, go ahead.
Just had a quick question for you, Professor.
We have one more question for you.
Professor,
We have one more.
just a quick question. What is the best age in order to train these kids for youth court? You mentioned in the beginning, I didn't want to you said, I don't want to talk about my elementary level, but what is that age that you recommend?
Thank you. 5th grade. I got a grant. We started with high school kids, did that for 3-4 years. Then I decided there wasn't that much difference between a freshman in high school and an 8th grade student. So we went to the middle schools, and we did 8th grade, then we did 7th, then we did 6th. Then I started wondering about 5th grade. I thought, well, the 6th graders have no problems whatsoever. By the way, the problem is never teaching the kids how to run a youth court. The problem is the administration buying into it. So I got a grant from a small foundation that allowed me to tinker with 3rd through 5th grade youth courts. And I spent 4 or 5 years working with kids in elementary schools, and I really think the easiest place is 5th grade because they're still optimistic. I deal with mostly kids in pretty disadvantaged, resource-poor school districts. 5th graders are still optimistic, and they're so excited to learn about the law and to be a judge, because in a youth court, the judge is actually one of the students. And just a comment that it took a while, but Upper Darby now has 16 youth courts. It has 2 in the high school, 4 in its middle schools, and it has 10 in its elementary schools. And that just happened. It was a 5-year process of going from let's start out, and then let's build, and let's build further. But anyway, again, a long answer. But I think the age of 12, 13 is about the easiest. It can be done with any group of students, but I think it's easier with relatively young students.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor. I appreciate you being here. Our next panel, as we get it set up, is the Protecting Our Communities panel. We have Chief John Egan, the Chief of Police of Bethel Township Police Department. We have Chris Iserman, the President of the Delco 27 Fraternal Order of Police, and Bob McCarron, the President of Chester County Fraternal Order of Police, Lodge 11. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. And Chief, if you could start us off, and we'll just go right down the line, and we'll have Q&A after.
Good morning, gentlemen and ladies. In talking to the representative, I would say, like most of the crime in my municipality, it's 8.1 square miles. We just surpassed 10,000 residents. I would say it's easily an upper-class neighborhood. We're bordered by Route 202 to the west and Route 322 to the east. Most of our crime is transient, with these two arteries on either side of us. We usually, when there's crimes occurred by the state police territory, we'll be notified immediately because these people were trying to leave town via these two main arteries. And one of the things that I've been trying to get money for is LPRs, and because of this amount of traffic that these people, 322 dumps down into 95, and you're right outside the city of Chester. All right, I don't think I need to expound any on the city of Chester and their crime rate, but it is difficult for us. We're a part-time police department. We're 23 part-time officers. I'm the only full-time person. I run 2 officers a shift, and then I run a power shift on the weekend, and it is really basically all we can do. I mean, this transit crime is coming from Westchester, Pennsylvania, Wilmington, Delaware, the northern Delaware, I should say, and they're here, they're gone, and most of them are crimes of opportunity, where they come in gangs, and when I say that, I mean maybe 4 or 5 people, and most of the time they're in a stolen car, and the tag doesn't match up to the vehicle, and they get out of the car. There's one person driving, of course, and 3 or 4 people will get out. They're black clothing, gloved. Thank God for medical masks, right, in our profession, because you can't ID them. And they're in our town from midnight to 3, 4 in the morning, and everything is very surreptitious. They just walk up the driveways, and I hate to say this, but I've been saying it for long. I've been chief, and that's 3 years. At every township meeting, please put your garage door down and lock it. Lock your car when it's in the driveway, and they just walk up, touch the door, release. If it doesn't release, they go to another vehicle. Ring's really great, gets us a lot of video, but all we see is masked men in black outfits and hats, gloves, and a mask, right? Difficult, to say the very least, when you're operating with a part-time police department. I take nothing away from my officers, but there's when you're a full-time officer and you're working, I'm sure these gentlemen will attest to this, when you're a full-time police officer and you're working 6 days a week or 5 days a week or whatever it is, okay, you have your hand on the pulse of what's going on. Some of my police officers work every 2 weeks, so they don't have their hand on the pulse as if they were full-time police officers. One of the other things that I've just don't understand, and I'd like to pass it on to you in case you've never heard of this, but I applied to the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency for a $59,000 grant for cameras. And I found out in January that I was not going to get the $59,000 out of, I think it was $130 million that was this grant. And the reason that I did not get it is because I was told by a person at PCCD that I did not have enough crime to warrant the cameras. It wasn't because of the crime that I was applying for the cameras. I was applying for the cameras for the safety of my men and the safety of the general public, and the pictures just absolutely don't lie. And I thought, and of course there was no match, and that's the best thing that came down the pike in the 3 years that I've been a police officer, where the municipality doesn't have to match, okay? And it's almost to the point where I'm not going to apply for any more grants, because if I don't have enough crime, why waste my time? And that is one of the, and it's not just because I'm a part-time police department. There's a lot of police departments in Delaware County and in Pennsylvania that are full-time police, right, or part-time, right? And just on this one topic, I think the officers deserve to have a camera on their body in this day and age. And the pictures don't lie. It's either going to prove that the cop was doing what he was supposed to do, or it's going to prove that he wasn't. And it's going to show you the actions of the actor that, has drawn the police into this matter. I mean, I don't know if I just wanted to tell you that, because I just think something has to be done, with the grant process, and that is that if somebody's asking for body cameras to protect their men and to protect the citizens of the Commonwealth, that should be prioritized, because not if you want to get 59,000, I'll use that number. If you want to use that 59,000 because you want to buy a police car, or you want to buy anything else in law enforcement, or send people out for training, right? The thing that's going to make the public and the police be more cohesive, in my thoughts, is that you're able to show that here's what happened, so that these people are knowledgeable, the general public, and they know either it's going to help the police officer show what happened, or it's going to show that the police officer overstepped his bounds, okay? I wish I had a solution to this answer, but I was floored when they told me that you don't have enough crime. It's hard for me to believe when there's $130 million on a table and I can't get $59,000 of it, when other police departments, and no ill will towards them, but they asked for a heck of a lot more money than I was asking for. And, and they got it. They got their money. So, I don't know if I've helped you guys, but I'm here to answer any other further questions. I'm trying to think about the town. One of the surprising things is the people in the town actually believe they have a full-time police department. They don't know that it's 23 guys that are certified by MOPEC and they're part-time. They come in my office all the time, and they believe it's a full-time police department, and we try to do the best we can do. So I guess I'm taking up too much time.
That's all right. Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Mr. McCarron?
Thank you, Chairman Cal. Thank you, Representative Williams, and the rest of the committee. My name is Bob McCarron. I am the Chester County FOP Lodge 11 president. I represent 940 members and their families, and we appreciate you asking us to be here and to discuss any issues that you have. We submitted remarks earlier that you should get electronically if you haven't already gotten it. I just wanted to give a little summary on that. When we sit and we look at the people in Harrisburg and across the country, words matter, but actions matter more. And we're asking you guys and your counterparts to protect our robust collective bargaining rights, enhance pay and benefits to assist in recruitment and retention. We have a true recruitment and retention problem here in Pennsylvania and across the country. Provide recruiting tools for Pennsylvania police departments, provide retirement security, including an ad hoc COLA adjustment, and an ability for our members that move from different departments to purchase some of those years that they served in one municipality to their retirement, so they can have a good retirement and retire at a decent age, and to protect the privacy and reputation of our officers. We stand here, on the precipice of real issues with recruitment and retention. We can't keep people and nobody wants to do this job. So with that, I'll stand for questions and turn it over to my counterpart from Delaware County.
President Iserman, go ahead.
Good morning, committee, and thank you for having me in front of you today. I especially want to thank Chairman Kale and Representative Williams. I welcome all of the members of the committee to Delaware County. My name is Chris Iserman, and I am the president of the Delaware County Fraternal Order of Police Lodge 27. In that position, I have the honor of representing over 1,200 members throughout the 39 police departments that the FOP represents in Delaware County. I'm also a state trustee on the state FOP executive board. In my position as a police officer, I currently hold the title of Deputy Chief of Police in Fallcroft Borough. That borough sits in the southeast corner of Delaware County, and we border Philadelphia City. I myself, as a police administrator, witnessed firsthand the issues that police departments all over this Commonwealth are dealing with in recruiting and retaining police officers. Our department is currently struggling to fill shifts to this day. So this issue does hit close to home for me. I would like to thank the committee for bringing the issues to the forefront of the Commonwealth. I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. I'm going to open up for questions now. I would like to start off by saying to all of you, thank you. Thank you for your service, for the service that you provide. I note that it's often we hear people saying that the veterans, and that's warranted. I appreciate the work that veterans have done to keep us safe here and to keep our freedoms alive here, but without police officers and people actually enforcing the laws, we wouldn't have that as well, right here on the ground in Pennsylvania and across the nation. And I have a cousin that is a sergeant detective for the Pittsburgh Police Department, and he is about a year away from retiring. And throughout the course of the last number of years, just talking to him about the situations, about people coming in, about not being able to get recruiting, just the sentiment on the ground for police officers from different places is atrocious. And he reflected very much of what you guys were saying about not able to recruit people because of that. And it's completely unwarranted, and it's something that that we ought to look at seriously and ensure that we are doing everything that we can to encourage people to do that job, because it is an honorable job, and we need good people doing it that have the guts to do it, that can get out there and make sure they're keeping us safe and maintaining law and order for us. The question I have for all three of you, gentlemen, is, have you noticed in the past couple of years a difference in crime, uptick in crime, challenges that you have faced as it relates to what's happening on the ground?
Absolutely been an uptick in crime. I mean, crime is going through the roof. Police officers' hands, they seem to be tied more than ever. They have a hard time of doing their job, whether it's district attorneys throughout the Commonwealth that don't want to enforce the laws that are on the books, or if it's local community boards and their councils and commissioners that are tying the hands of police officers. This job's never been tougher than it is today. It's really a struggle. And young officers don't want to come in and do this job because they see the struggles that we're dealing with now. And they feel as, why should I come in and do this job if you're not going to let me do the job completely? Which I mean by that is, if I arrest somebody for a crime, they need to go to jail. And that's not happening today in certain areas of the Commonwealth.
Yeah, I would reiterate that you know, in Chester County, our DA is good, but we see the effects of policies from DAs across the Commonwealth, and they come into Chester County and they feel that they're not going to be held accountable. You know, we feel that the people who commit crimes, you know, need to be held accountable for what they do. As you were talking earlier with the first panel about accountability being, you know, needed, and that's what we see, and that's what we want to see. And it has a direct effect on younger officers coming in, where they feel like, you know, the only people being held accountable today are the police. Nobody's holding the criminals accountable. That's the feeling that's down on the boots on the ground.
I don't need to take any more time. I just think that, you know, these two gentlemen have covered everything with the problems. And maybe I'm sort of a little bit unique because I have 23 part-time police officers. It is extremely hard to get people, qualified people. And I don't care that they went to the police academy and they passed the academy and all the regulations for MOPEC. It's just the quality of the person that we're getting is not the quality of person that we got before. And I believe we used to have 50, 60 people in the police academy, 3 classes a year. They're lucky now if they have 20, 22. And when you have 47 municipalities, 43 municipalities, and they're trying to pick these guys from 20, when before we were picking from 50 and 60 out of the police academy, and that was 3 times a year. So 180 people, roughly, 150 people, right, versus 60. And I know I'm right on the recent classes because I spoke to one of the guys that's probably one of the busiest instructors in Delaware County, and 20. The average in Delaware County is about 20 per class now, and that's starting. I didn't get what graduate, and it's probably a little bit less because they see the difficulty in taking the police academy and meeting MOPEC standards, but we need to do something to increase that amount that are attending the police academies. I don't know if it's the pay, I don't know if it's benefits, but we need to make it look pretty sweet to become a police officer. We're losing in the battle to replace experienced police officers.
So I just want to, jump on the point that the chief made. 20 people in the police academy, but they've canceled classes, so they're not turning out 3. So it's not 60, it's more like 40. We have a perception problem. People look at law enforcement as the problem. There's a perception problem in this country, not just in Pennsylvania. And we need to get to our youth and explain to them that it is a noble profession and you're doing a great job. And I don't know how we do that, but we appreciate your asking the questions and wanting to work. And we'll make a promise. I know, President Eiserman and myself will make a promise to work with you to better that perception.
And I do appreciate that, and it's remarkable, and I keep referring back to my cousin who's in the Pittsburgh police force, and he's never complained about the pay, even though the pay isn't great. It's a fair pay. The hours are tough, but he's never complained about that. What's very disheartening for him is just how officers are perceived. And I think there's a lot of people out there that probably appreciate that it's a noble profession, but just don't want to put up with the nonsense and don't want to put up with the attacks that you're getting as it goes. So my last question would be then, in your estimation, and this is an open-ended and somewhat impossible question because it's a cultural issue that we all need to be involved in solving. But in your estimation, how do we get more people to start getting engaged and applying for police positions? Everywhere we talk to people in every part of the state, we hear the same issues, and especially in communities in this region in particular, is that we don't have the numbers. We don't have the officers. We don't have people applying. We just heard from the chief another similar thing. What can we do practically right now to help you all fill the numbers that you need for your police departments?
I mean, one of the things is our incentives. You see that being done in Florida, where they're giving officers, $5,000 signing bonuses to come to Florida to be law enforcement officers. I mean, they're taking good officers from Pennsylvania to go to Florida. Incentives, you want to make the department attractive. You want to make sure the department has different units that the officers can serve in. One problem we have here in Delaware County is our training facilities. They're not the best. I mean, you look at our counterparts in Chester County and Montgomery County, their facilities are second to none. All our officers don't want to come here and work and then have to go train and be educated in a facility that's dilapidated, for a better lack of words. I mean, it's terrible. So you really have to you really got to put the incentive out there for these young guys to come do this job. I mean, because they're looking at the news, they see that just this year alone, 135 police officers have been shot, 15 of them have been killed, and I'm sure that number went up this weekend with our brother over in Deptford that died after he was shot in the line of duty in March. So, I mean, young people see that and they say they don't want to go into profession where they're going to be shot and stabbed and attacked. So, I mean, you really just have to make it more attractive to them, and I'm not quite so sure how you do that yet.
We also need to change the narrative. We need politicians like yourselves who are willing to stand up and say, you know, the police officers do a noble job, they do a great job, and, you know, police officers in Pennsylvania do a great job. You know, we understand that, you know, there are some out there that want to highlight people who have made mistakes or done things that they're not supposed to do, but for the vast majority, our officers are good officers who do a noble job, and we need our elected officials to stand up and you know, change that narrative. We see that the news media is only going to focus on the negative. It's what they do. It's not just with police, it's with anything. You know, so we have to push out the positive and show that, and we're going to need your help to do that.
I think the incentive has to be to get them into the police academy. I don't think we need the help after they've completed it. We need them. That's the first step. They've got to go to the police academy to meet the requirements. So I believe the incentive should be, and I'm just throwing this out, if you complete it, it's free. Somebody funds it, but police academy cost per officer, or I should say applicant, right, is borne by the applicant, all right? And it gets to be quite a fee, because they have to buy uniforms, and they have to buy workout uniforms that look like police workout uniforms. You know, some things aren't supplied, and they should be free. I mean, it's like if you go to college and, you know, you got to buy your books, but if there's anything else that the teacher wants you to have, he supplies it, okay? So I think that's one thing that could be looked at, is that, you know, make it easier for these people to go to the academy, more financial betterment, right? So that they're not reaching deep into their pockets, right? And it is quite expensive when you don't even know if you're going to have a job at the end of the police academy. The incentives, I think, have to come there right from the beginning. You know, don't say you're going to give them the incentive 50% of the time going in, right? It should be black and white. Here's what you're going to get. Here's what we'll do for you. If you go to the academy, pass it, right, meet all the qualifications, and like the deputy chief said, you know, give them some kind of maybe a financial incentive, or maybe, you know, bear the cost of the academy. And if you pass, fine. And if you don't pass, then you're going to owe. I mean, I just lost a police officer, 34, 35, worked for me for, well, I've only been in Bethel for 3 years, but worked in law enforcement in Delaware County for about 9 years. He just left to go to St. Petersburg, Florida. They give him a car. The pay is $150,000 to start. Benefits out, you know what, okay? Retirement benefits, all right? The pot has to be sweetened here some way, somehow, where he can go to St. Petersburg. They even took his time that he was here, and I think it was 8 years. They put that right on the day he walked in the door and was sworn. They gave him those 8 years to start. He didn't start it the first year. Florida seems to be way ahead of the scale of any other state that I know of, honestly, and I'm not bashing Pennsylvania. I know I have cop friends in Arizona, you know, Minnesota, right? I mean, Ohio, and throughout Pennsylvania, a couple in New York, but that's where it's at. We got to get ahead of the other areas that are going after this pool. And, you know, when he told me what they were going to give him once he was selected, I don't know of any other police department, unless you guys know, I mean, in the state of Pennsylvania that can match up to that. And they're 150 strong in that police department. It's not some, you know, it's not like Bethel Township, you know, I mean, St. Petersburg, Florida, and they have like Chris said, all the different units, right? Not all, you can't do all that with the units, but you can certainly sweeten the pot to at least get their interest to get into the police academy, and then make it worth their while to pass it, right? It's strict. I mean, you have to meet certain qualifications. I don't think that they're pie in the sky, but you got to make it interesting to them. And I think the ball starts in the state, because the state sets the rules for the police academy. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, before I get to you, I want to thank all the members of the policy committee that came up here, because the real import of this particular panel is to help you learn what's happening in my district. I think Chief Egan laid it out very well when talking about these transportation corridors that not only bound his municipality, which is Bethel, but bound my district, which is 322, Highway 1, and 202. 3 major transportation corridors, which makes it very easy for somebody to get into the 8 municipalities of the 160th and then quickly get out. By way of one example that happened about 2 weeks ago, and I only know this by way of police reports, I don't have any inside information, but one of the new tactics is to come up to people at an intersection, run into the back of them to make them believe they were just in a traffic accident, causing the driver to pull off on the side of the road. And in 2 instances, somebody got out of the trail car, pointed a gun at the driver, got them out of their vehicle, and carjacked the car. In the second instance, it was a young woman, and they pointed a gun at her, dragged her out of the car, put her in the chase vehicle, and then sexually assaulted her, right here in our district. That's happening. So, you know, as the presidents of Delaware County and Chester County FOP have indicated, you know, while we have a robust criminal justice system in our 2 counties, we are surrounded by places where there's a lack of it. And it's endangering all of us. And these folks are standing on the front line. So whereas our first panel was about the soft side of criminal justice and what we can do to keep people out of the criminal justice system, this is about holding the line. This is about keeping them out of our homes. I don't know if any of you have been a victim of a home invasion, but I have. And it feels personally invasive. I mean, personally, it stays with you for a long time. And then to have your vehicles in your driveway broken into 3 times feels personally invasive. Happening right here in the suburbs of Philadelphia, literally the suburbs of Wilmington. We're caught in the crossfire. And these men and women are standing between us and them. And I wanted you to hear from them. So I'm going to go down the line with questions for each one of you. Chief, thank you so much for being here. Again, for context, Chief Egan is the chief of a volunteer force in Bethel Township. I think we have 3 municipal forces with Wego and Birmingham, and the rest of our municipalities, 5 municipalities in the 160th, are served by state troopers. So I want to give you the microphone again about funding problems in Bethel. I supported you with your grant application to get body cameras. You and I have talked about it many times. I thought we wrote a fantastic package. And the fact that somebody in Harrisburg doesn't believe there's enough crime going on in 160th and in Bethel is reprehensible. I'm standing shoulder to shoulder with you to fight crime, to make our community safe, right? We use that as a tagline, not because it's helpful in elections, it's because it's what we believe. We live here, we love where we live, and we want you to love it too. We want it to be safe. And it begins with things like body cameras. I mean, what could be wrong with body cameras to protect especially volunteer people, right, who aren't on the job as many hours as our full-time force? And the fact patterns for them are probably more difficult than somebody that's seeing it every single day on a regular rotation. So I'd like for you to talk just for a moment, Chief, about how the force in Bethel is funded, which I think is largely by the constituency, not so much by the state, and just what we can do financially to beef up your force.
Yep, most of my funding comes from the municipality through the tax base, okay? The I just want to take you back here. When I applied for the body cameras, the application was 47 pages long. I'm not a grant writer. I didn't go to school to be a grant writer. And they ask you so many minute questions, you know, and you have to supply the answers, right? And me and my lieutenant, now you got a total there of about 70 years of experience. I've never ran across an application like that before in my whole career, and I know he hasn't. And I know that certain bases have to be touched because it's, you know, state money, but there's got to be an easier way to fund these tools that the basic tools, body cameras, vests, car cameras, LPRs. LPRs are the license plate readers. They're the best thing a cop could have ever. And I'm sure these guys would ring that endorsement, is that all that police officer has to do is put it in the computer. The car's a pink Cadillac, right? And it used to belong to Elvis Presley, right? Well, if it's going down 202, it's going to hit the LPRs, right, that are hanging from the traffic lights, okay? And at least you know where they're at. At least you can track the vehicle. Delaware's loaded with LPRs. I've gone to my commissioners twice, both times for body cameras and car cameras and LPRs. And because of the flat-out cost of it, they couldn't fund it. So that's why I went through PCCD, and I really thought I had a winner. All right, I mean, what better piece of equipment could you give a police officer than a camera, right, or LPRs? And then, you know, to say that, you know, the people with the crime got the money. It's just, to me, totally not fair. But I think that's where we need to be, is target the areas that help the cops solve these crimes. And I hope these guys back me. The LPRs should be in every police department in the state. We give police officers vests. Every police officer in the state has the opportunity to wear a vest if they want to. Every police department should have the tools, because the municipalities they just can't find $59,000, which is what, and that was the bare bones. That was not that all 23 of my guys had a camera. They were 11 cameras, body cameras, and 5 car cameras that I have, right? And when he comes off a midnight shift, I take the 4 to 12 shift cameras. And then when he comes in day work, right, he takes the midnight cameras. They're charged up in like 4 or 5 hours. But if you want to try see some kind of a dent in crime, LPRs are the thing, and so are the body cameras, because initially cops were like, oh, I don't know if I really want to wear one, right? Now it's been proven 93% of the time it clears the police officer. I mean, you can't ask for better odds of that. So I'm just asking you, some way, somehow, find the money and for the tools that you work with every day to try to suppress crime. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. President McCarron, I would note that you took the humble approach in introducing yourself, but you didn't say that you're a 32-year veteran of law enforcement, and much of your career was actually in Delaware County as well. So you're a particularly valuable resource for me in that you know both Delaware and Chester counties, and as in your presidency of the Chester County FOP now. You had touched on morale problems, and that's what I would like for you to talk about, is what is truly driving low morale the most. Of course, we have a national narrative problem, and by the way, let me be the one to say you're doing a great job, and thank you. I know you guys need to hear that continuously from us, and I take that opportunity every single time. Is it the national narrative of defund the police? Is it the national narrative, as the chief said, that 93% of the times on body cam it's exonerating for cops that's not getting out? Is it this sense that cops are the bad guys? Or is it the low pay? I mean, recruitment and retention, as a 28-year Marine Corps colonel, I can tell you it's everything about the prestige. If you can elevate the nature of the job, people will work for less money if they think it's honorable and helping their community, which being a police officer is. Being a former federal prosecutor with the Department of Justice in Philly and Denver, I can tell you that there is no substitute for a vibrant, healthy, happy force. Talk to us about morale and what the problems are.
Yeah, thank you. I am currently a patrol officer in West Pikeland Township, and I hear from the patrol officers and sergeants and corporals on the street all the time, and it's all of those things that you named. It's a combination of all of it. We feel betrayed at times. We feel left out. Body cameras are a great tool. I don't know why anyone that has a police department wouldn't invest in the body cameras. And it's not just the body camera itself, the cost. There is an extreme cost to retain those videos. But what we see is it becomes a management tool, an HR tool, and they look at little things that aren't necessarily what the reasons that the body cameras were purchased for, to correct what they would deem as poor behavior, or if they don't like an officer, use those things against him and from the administration, right? So you have that. You have the narrative that the police are bad, to defund the police and not give them any money. The whole, we need to reform the police departments. We do a great job of looking at things and saying, this isn't working, let's pivot and go to the next thing, right? I call it that we're constantly reforming. We change policies all the time. We look at it. One of the biggest issues that I see that drives morale down is we don't know what is wanted. We have politicians, local politicians, and administrators who say one thing, and a general public who feel a different way. So you get pressure to, write tickets when, maybe a warning was warranted, but, you feel that pressure, and it drives morale down. And then when, people you've known your whole life, when you become a police officer and they're no longer your friends and stuff like that, it really takes a toll. But you are correct when you say that money is not the driving factor. We didn't get into this profession to become rich. On the contrary, right? My dad was a police officer. He retired from the city of Philadelphia as a captain. I'm a second-generation law enforcement officer, and it is my honor to serve in that role. And I don't do it for the money. I want to have a good pay so I can take care of my family. And I work in a pretty well off municipality. But I couldn't afford to live there, but that's okay. I still get a good pay, and we have to look at good benefits so I can retire, because we're not like other individuals who can do this job till we're 70 years old, right? Only a few of us get to be chief or deputy chief of a department. The rest of us are going to have to retire, at an age where it's not safe for us to be 60, 65, doing shift work and working, when we're exhausted, which happens all the time. This recruitment and retention problem that we have, it affects the officers working who want to stay in. Now they have to work double shifts. They get mandated to do overtime, right? And that drives morale down, right? Like, I had something I wanted to do, but I can't do that because we don't have enough people to fill the shift. It's a real problem that permeates everything. So I hope I've answered your question.
You absolutely answered it, and you're talking to a group up here that hears that message and will support you. President Eiserman, I want to pick up on something that you said in your testimony, which is about prosecuting crime. There is no doubt, there can be no doubt, that there's a direct correlation between an increasingly violent community and the lack of prosecuting crime. I mean, that's just unassailable as a fact. And we've got that going on in our neighboring city, where last year there were well over 500 homicides and for example, reluctance to prosecute prior convicted felons in possession of guns. in your experience, and I know in my experience as a prosecutor, that violent crime is overwhelmingly committed by prior convicted felons. So attacking felon in possession cases as a category will drive down crime. We've been working on that in the House, providing funding for Project Safe Neighborhoods to attack gun crime, providing for a gun violence task force in Philadelphia. We passed that out of the House last year, and it sat in the Senate. Democrats are going to try to bring that bill again and have it apply statewide as though the problem's not in Philadelphia. So my question to you, President Eiserman, is about this lack of prosecution and the impact that it even has in Delaware County. So assuming, for the sake of argument, that Delaware County is doing a fine job of prosecuting, the lack thereof in our neighboring cities has a direct impact on our community, and I would like for you to discuss that, please.
Absolutely. You need to look no farther than the city of Philadelphia, which multiple police departments in the southeast end of Delaware County border Philadelphia City. And you see it every day, whether it's illegal ATV bikes, whether it's street racing, whether it's people walking around with guns and not being held accountable, but they're coming over into Delaware County. We, the police officers, are stopping them, and they just tell us, well, we're allowed to do this in Philadelphia. Well, this isn't Philadelphia. This is Delaware County. We're going to hold you liable here, and we're going to arrest you, and we're going to prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law. And we're lucky in Delaware County where we have a DA that does do that. But, I mean, it's whether it's Upper Darby, Darby Borough, East Lansdowne, Fallcroft, Sharon Hill, every day you're seeing people come in from Philadelphia and they're destroying the quality of life here in Delaware County because they're getting away with it in Philadelphia and they think they can do the same thing here, and they can't, and we need to stop that.
I appreciate you bringing up ATVs because that became a point of contention up in Harrisburg for those who don't understand what ATV gangs look like. So they felt like ATV legislation that was happening to forfeit ATVs when seized in criminal activity was somehow going to make it out to the rural communities. Can you describe what it's like to run into a 30 to 50 ATV gang that's riding up and down the street? Describe what that scenario looks like and why it's such a law enforcement nightmare.
It's chaos. I mean, you're not banning ATVs in Sullivan County where there's dirt roads and, forest. We're talking about the city of Philadelphia where you have 40 to 80 ATVs, motorcycles, four-wheelers, three-wheelers, UTVs. I mean, they're putting everything on the road. And they're driving up and down Broad Street or 84th Street, Woodland Avenue, which borders Darby Borough. They're surrounding cars. You have housewives out driving, picking their kids up at school. They're scared. And then what happens when that mother, she panics and steps on the gas to get out of there because she feels unsafe and runs somebody over on an ATV? Larry Krasner is going to prosecute her. He's not going to prosecute the ones on the ATVs. He's going to prosecute the person that's trying to get away because they are scared to death. I've been around that situation, even as a police officer. They surround your car, they throw bricks at your car, and they just keep on going. And they go from one end of the city to the other. And they come into Upper Darby all the time on 69th Street, and then they go right back into Philadelphia again. It's a terrible situation, and someone's seriously going to get hurt, and I'm sure they already have been.
And as you said, if you're in the middle of that situation, it is absolutely terrifying because you don't know whether to go or to stop, and most of the time it's designed to make you stop in the middle of traffic so they can surround you.
And if you stop, then they're going to attempt to get in your car. They're going to open up your car door. They're going to try and take your pocketbook. You see it on YouTube videos all the time.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
All right.
Could I comment on something there?
Yes, sir, Chief.
Yesterday in the Philadelphia Inquirer, they ran a special about guns. And I'm just asking you gentlemen to look at this. The straw purchases of guns. They just made a couple of arrests where he just was sentenced Friday, and he got 10 years in jail for multiple straw purchases of weapons.
A Westchester student at that.
Pardon me?
It was a Westchester student at that.
That's correct.
Yep.
And I don't understand how when they go through the PICS check, right, which is checking it, see if the guy has a record, and then he doesn't have a record, it's okay to sell him the gun. And how this one individual got caught is because somebody was bright enough that he was purchasing the same gun every day. He had over 35 straw purchases. How come something can't be built into the system that checks that if they see Jack Egan come in and he's buying a Glock Model 19 Generation 5 9mm and he buys 5 of them in 5 days? There has to be some type of red flag in the system that the state police is using that I would think even if somebody bought 3 guns of the same type, why would they be doing that, right? And this article just blew me away. I can't believe that we are not smart enough have the equipment to do this, to check, to see if Jack Egan's making multiple purchases. And another guy that was in the article, he's pled guilty also. Every Friday he was buying a handgun or assault rifle. There has to be some checks here, some way to keep, it may help keep these guns, because there's so many guns on the street now. I'm sure these guys will say, yeah, but, you know, there's so many guns on the street now, it's unbelievable. And, you know, maybe it puts a dent in it. I don't think it takes it away, but I think maybe it puts a dent into it. That if you buy 3 handguns in 3 days, right, we want to know why you're doing that. To me, it just raises, the guy may not be guilty of anything, and he may be. And it just, to me, says to be able to put further checks and balances that if you have multiple gun purchases in the state of Pennsylvania, right, for the same weapon, or if you bought 3 individual type weapons and they're all 9mm, maybe somebody needs to look at this. That's from a common sense standpoint. I'm just throwing it out there. Thank you.
Any further questions? I think we are, Representative Lawrence?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for making time to be here today. I know you've got a lot going on, and I appreciate it. Last session, I had the opportunity to chair a committee that looked into the situation in Philadelphia with regard to crime, gun violence, and it was very eye-opening for me as someone who's lived in Chester County my whole life and as someone who's very interested in seeing the success of the city. I believe the success of the city is important for the overall success of the Commonwealth. It certainly was very eye-opening, and a lot of the conversations that were had behind closed doors were, again, very eye-opening. And I don't want to make this into a long story about the situation necessarily in Philadelphia, but I do just want to, I think it's relevant to what we were talking about here, and I just want to get your take on this. So the district attorney from Philadelphia was widely quoted stating that he doesn't believe arresting people and convicting them for illegal gun possession is a viable strategy to reduce shootings. So I don't want to, tee up a softball for you, but I am curious to get your response to that thought that, again, arresting and convicting people for illegal gun possession, it's just not worth our time. Could you maybe provide, because I know we have some freshmen on the committee here who might not even be aware of this. I'd like to give you the opportunity to comment on that thought and maybe how it might be relevant to us as policymakers as we're looking on a state level.
Thank you, Representative Lawrence. Holding people accountable is what it's about, right? Like, otherwise, why do we have laws? The laws are written for a reason. You got the General Assembly, you guys have decided that these laws need to be on the books, and if you don't hold the people accountable, it's anarchy. What's next? If we're not going to hold them accountable for illegally possessing a firearm, we're not going to hold them accountable for using that firearm. That's what it comes down to. If we can catch them just having the gun and it's illegal and we can hold them accountable, then that's fine. And accountability is a wide range, right? I mean, you prosecute them, and we have a great system. We arrest them for the violation. The DA prosecutes them. The judge then sits in judgment with the jury. They decide if they're guilty, and he decides what the appropriate punishment is. That is the system we have. That is the system that we need to continue to utilize, and not just have a person or a group in the system decide, well, we're just not going to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, panel, and thank you, Representative Williams. You have been for some time now a leader on these topics in Harrisburg, and it has been very enlightening to see members of your community here to talk about these issues. Thank you for bringing us here and for discussing these issues. I just, in brief closing here, want to make note. It seems like today that there's this willingness to, for lack of better words, stick our heads in the sands as elected officials on this subject. You know, in 2018, it seemed like there was more flagrant matters going on with elected officials marching and slogans and all this other nonsense, and now it's kind of dissipated a little bit. But I think now we are seeing the results of that nonsense. And we are seeing the tangible, practical results of the garbage that was spewed over the course of the last number of years. Are there bad apples? Sure. Of course. That's every profession. It's outrageous to pinpoint an entire profession based on the actions of a couple actors. If that were the case, I'm a lawyer. You know, we would all be hung by this at this point. And you could go through the line, whether it's teachers, lawyers, priests, whatever it is, right? That's just why we even make logical connections there with police officers is beyond me. And I think it's imperative that as elected officials, we come out and say very loud and proudly that we support the police. And I think as we're running for office and while we're in office, I think that has to happen. Because while we might take it for granted that, of course, everyone does. How can't you? They're the ones that are protecting us here at home. They're the ones that are ensuring law and order. They're the ones that are making sure that we can just live our lives on a day-to-day basis. Not enough of us come out and say it, and I think we ought to demand that out of our elected officials. And I think that when we're running for office, when we're in office, we have to keep repeating that message because it is having very, very tangible negative results because of the rhetoric that we've seen coming from the other end of the spectrum. So again, I would like to say thank you to you all. Thank you for your service. I'm looking forward to working with you in any way that we can advance your interests so that we can have safe streets, not just in this region, but across the entire Commonwealth. Our next hearing is in Bucks County Wednesday. It's Representative Craig Stats District, and it'll be on workforce development. I appreciate all the members for coming, and this meeting is adjourned.